In this episode, we talk about the collective resignation of the Kargil unit of the Jammu and Kashmir National Conference. We also talk about the sharp rise in the number of forest fires in Uttarakhand. But first, we talk about the Supreme Court granting interim bail to Delhi Chief Minister Arvind Kejriwal. Hi, I am Niharika Nanda, and you are listening to Three Things, the Indian Express news show. On the 21st of March, less than a month before the Lok Sabha polls were set to begin, Arvind Kejriwal was arrested in connection with the Delhi excise policy case. This made him the first sitting chief minister in India to be put behind bars. But after being lodged in Tihar jail for 50 days, the Supreme Court granted him interim bail on Friday until the 1st of June. This decision brings immense relief to both Kejriwal and the Aam Aadmi Party, especially considering that polling has yet to take place in 18 of the 22 Lok Sabha constituencies where the party is contesting. As he emerged from the jail on Friday, surrounded by hundreds of supporters and amid the sound of firecrackers, Kejriwal declared that we all must unite to save the country from dictatorship.
मैंने कहा था ना मैं जल्दी आऊंगा आ गया आप लोगों से एक ही निवेदन है हमें सबको मिलके देश को तानाशाही से बचाना है.
In many ways, this decision by the Supreme Court was unprecedented and could potentially affect the cases of the other political detainees as well. To understand what led the court to make this decision, my colleague Shashank Bhargava speaks to Indian Express's Apurva Vishwanath.
Apurva, firstly, remind our listeners in what way has the Enforcement Directorate connected Kejriwal to the excise policy case?
So as of now, the Enforcement Directorate's case against Arvind Kejriwal is of vicarious liability. The charge is that there were kickbacks involved in the excise policy scam, which of course the policy was never implemented, it was scrapped. So those kickbacks were routed for the Aam Aadmi Party election campaign in Goa. Now, because he's the chief minister and the head of the policy of the state, so to speak, he's vicariously liable for formulating the policy, right? The ED's claim is that he enabled or started the money laundering route, that he was a source of generating funds for money laundering. And secondly, because he's also the party president, that then he's vicariously liable for the party using these so-called tainted money. So as of now, this is the only case of vicarious liability against Arvind Kejriwal. Despite him being in custody for about 50 days now, the ED has not really made a direct connection where Arvind Kejriwal is, say, seen to be taking money or passing it on to somebody else. That direct connection is yet to be made.
And Apurva, we know that getting bail in a money laundering case can be very difficult, and his bail was denied multiple times. Could you tell us what were the main reasons for that? What was the court looking at?
So, Shashank, like we've been talking so often about Section 45 of the PMLA Act, which is the bail clause, right? So it has a very high bar for judges to be able to grant bail. So now his bail has been rejected by the trial court and the high court. So in the trial court, the judge has to be satisfied that there is no prima facie case against Kejriwal. Here it really becomes, at some point, the judge's own subjective analysis of whether there is a prima facie case or not. And the prosecution is, of course, very seriously backing that there is a prima facie case, right? So to go against that and grant bail is a high order. And the appeal in the High Court, again, lies between one bench which looks at all the cases concerning MPs and MLAs. And so even there, he's not been able to get bail. It's the same standard even in the High Court. Interestingly, what Kejriwal's lawyers did is actually challenge the legitimacy of the arrest itself. So it's in a roundabout way saying that you had no grounds to arrest me in the first place, instead of directly just saying that, please give me bail. So challenging the legality of the arrest for their lawyers seemed like a stronger case. Their main argument is that, look, I didn't know whether I was summoned as an accused or a witness in this case. It is true that Kejriwal ducked about 9 summons from the ED, but in about 5 of them, Kejriwal has written back to the ED asking if he's being summoned as an accused or a witness. And the ED never responded to him on those questions. And secondly, the ED's case itself says that Kejriwal's name sort of first popped up in January in an approval statement, right? But he wasn't arrested up until mid-March. So why the delay in arrest? So if at that point, if I couldn't tamper evidence, then why now? So the question of the timing of the arrest itself being closer to the Lok Sabha elections, that is something that Kejriwal's lawyers had been playing on.
Right, and it would have taken time for the court to decide that. Plus, we know that on the 17th of May, the Supreme Court closes for summer vacation for a 6-week break. And so this period right now was crucial. But tell us, what turned things around for Kejriwal? What made the Supreme Court give him interim bail?
So it is actually this acknowledgement of this fact that this is going to take time. So it is going to take 8 weeks. And in the meantime, the Lok Sabha elections will be done. So it is an interim arrangement till that point, just to be able to, give him some time to campaign. So it is not a finding on merit. It's not that the court is satisfied that Kejriwal deserves to be released on bail or not. This is only an interim arrangement. And such interim bail is, there is a legal precedent which says that the Supreme Court's power to grant bail also includes the power to grant interim bail. So let's say somebody being granted interim bail to attend the last rites of their parents or, some such exigency, right? In Kejriwal's case, the court has decided that campaigning for Lok Sabha elections for somebody like Arvind Kejriwal is an exigency. So on that facts of the case, and he's been granted interim bail also for a very short duration, 1st of June, when Punjab will go to polls. So after that, Kejriwal will have to surrender again to the ED till the Supreme Court finally decides on the legality of his arrest. And it's only then that Kejriwal cannot come out of jail.
And Apurva, ED, while arguing against it, had said that campaigning is not a fundamental right. That's not a reason for Kejriwal to get bail. Could you tell us what the Supreme Court said regarding what it means for someone like Kejriwal to be able to campaign right now?
So, we know that it is an interim order for a short duration with all the caveats of, that this is not a finding on merit and all of that. But why this is still a very momentous decision is because the political stakes are not lost in the court. Although the court doesn't say it in as many words, the reasoning basically points towards this. And here I quote the Supreme Court. The appellant Arvind Kejriwal is the Chief Minister of Delhi and the president of a national political party. So this is not lost on the court at all. Again, the court doesn't comment on the timing of the verdict. But the court does say that the Lok Sabha elections are the biggest event in India this year. And it says about 650 to 700 million people go to vote. And basically that it is very trite to say that the Lok Sabha elections are not the big deal for a political party in this year. So basically, the Supreme Court is allowing a political level playing field, which is the only reason why they're releasing Arvind Kejriwal on interim bail. So if you look at, it's a very short order of about 8 pages, where the court simply says that, look, we are not making a distinction between, a political person and an ordinary citizen, but each case has to be looked at in those peculiar facts when it comes to interim bail. And Arvind Kejriwal's peculiar facts are that he's the Chief Minister of Delhi. So tomorrow, if there is another case, that it would depend on facts of those cases. But in this case, he is the Chief Minister and he is the president of a national political party. And he can't be in jail when they're fighting an election.
And this bail, of course, comes with a bunch of conditions that Kejriwal must follow during this period. Talk about what some of these conditions are.
Actually, it's a huge relief for Kejriwal. The first reading of those conditions might look like they are limitations, but in fact, they actually give a breather to Kejriwal. Of course, the first couple is just like, about surety. He's asked to furnish a bail bond of 50,000 rupees, all of that. And the second says that he shall not visit the office of the Chief Minister, which is a secretariat. Then the third one is actually very crucial, where it is basically repeating an acknowledgement that Kejriwal's lawyers made in court, that he will not sign any file as Chief Minister unless there is a file which is being blocked by the LG only because Kejriwal has not signed. So we must remember that Kejriwal is a chief minister without a portfolio. Right now there is a model code of conduct. So the cabinet is not meeting the state cabinet, which of course the chief minister heads. And the cabinet is not making any big policy decisions or, some such thing, which needs the chief minister to sign on some things. Right now, as per the rules of conduct, Kejriwal's only role is to officially communicate with the LG. This communication cannot be delegated to ministers. This communication cannot be delegated to any other person. It has to be under the seal and signature of Arvind Kejriwal. So we've seen already that the Delhi mayoral elections have been stalled because the LG said that Kejriwal has not signed the file and it can't be done by other ministers. In fact, Health Minister Saurabh Bharadwaj said he could do it on Kejriwal's behalf, but the LG did not budge. So if the LG is seen to be blocking something because Kejriwal is not available, then Kejriwal can clear those files. Of course, these files will not relate to anything around the excise policy scam. I mean, there is no new excise policy now anyway. So this order, what it essentially does is allows Kejriwal to, in a sense, save his chief ministership for a while till maybe the court finally decides on what the next steps will be.
And Apurva, has this ever happened before? Has the Supreme Court granted interim bail in a case like this?
Has the Supreme Court granted interim bail? Yes, of course, regularly, perhaps dozens every day. Has the Supreme Court granted interim bail during the Lok Sabha elections to allow a national political candidate to campaign? No, that hasn't happened before. So even in the Supreme Court, this question was raised. And even the precedents that the court itself cites are all, when it comes to Chandrababu Naidu or others, they are all grant of regular bail. In fact, even the judges during the hearings were recollecting how George Fernandes in 77 contested an election from jail and won with a huge margin. It's not that Fernandes was let out to campaign. So in that sense, the court's direct intervention to ensure a level playing field in an election is probably for the first time.
And Apurva, what do you think this could mean for other political leaders who have also been arrested? Like, for example, Hemant Soren. I mean, he was also arrested in a money laundering case and has a bail application that is still pending.
So, of course, this order does say that it depends on the facts of that case. The first layer interpretation of that is that Soren's would be a completely different case. Having said that, the court, what it does is opens the gates to account for political exigencies in case of certain people, which is like, say, a politician or somebody like that. So it leaves the door open for future cases like this. Whether Soren's will be a fit case is something that we don't know. For starters, Soren is not a sitting chief minister. So those things could be different. But having said that, the court does leave the door open for considering such things in future.
And next we talk about Ladakh and the Jammu and Kashmir region. Last week, all the members of the National Conference's Kargil unit resigned together, citing pressure from the party high command to support the Congress candidate. This came days after the National Conference's Kargil district president, Haji Hanifa Jan, filed his nomination as an independent candidate from the Ladakh Parliamentary constituency. To find out more on the matter and what the political landscape in Jammu and Kashmir looks like after the revocation of Article 370, Indian Express's Naveed Iqbal joins us. So, Naveed, can you begin by telling us what actually made the National Conference's Kargil unit collectively submit their resignation?
So what happened a few days ago was that Kargil and Leh, the two districts of Ladakh, have always sort of fought for representation in parliament, but there's only one seat. Now, Kargil and Leh both have very different demographic makeup. Leh is largely Buddhist dominated and Kargil is largely Shia Muslim dominated, and the entire region is almost 90% ST population. So the Ladakh representation becomes a bit contested every time there is elections are around the corner. Kargil wants their own representative and Leh would like its own. But over the last few years, for over a decade now, largely representation has been from Leh to parliament, and almost always it's a Buddhist candidate from the region. So this time around, with Leh being in a state of unrest for almost 4 years since the abrogation of Article 370 in 2019, this time around with Congress and NC mobilizing together over the last few years, they were hoping that Kargil would have the mandate to send a candidate to parliament. And however, when Congress leaders from Kargil went to negotiate this with the party high command in Delhi, the candidate that was finally chosen, Sering Namgyal, is again from Leh. So this led to a bit of discord with the Kargil units of both NC and Congress, who a day prior had already named senior NC leader Haji Hanifa Jan, Mohammad Hanifa Jan, who's also called Haji Hanifa, as their candidate. However, when Congress formally announced its candidate, it was a different candidate and it was Sering Namgyal from Leh. So following that, the NC's Kargil unit decided to resign en masse, and Haji Hanifa, who's their former district president, filed his nomination as an independent candidate.
And Naveed, can you talk a little about Sering Namgyal and Haji Hanifa Jan, the two candidates that are at the center of this conflict?
So, Sering Namgyal is a long-term Congress worker from the region, and he's been an active worker there, and he's a Buddhist from Leh, and he has the party's mandate this time. And Haji Hanifa is a former chief executive councillor of the Autonomous Hill Development Council of Kargil. He's a very popular candidate and he has the support of the Kargil Democratic Alliance. The KDA is a socio-religious body which has been spearheading the movement for demanding this 4-point agenda, which is part of Ladakh's demands with the MHA. So Haji Hanifa is part of that also. He had contested the last LHDC election, which we covered in September last year, but he lost the local election. However, because NC has a strong presence on the ground and the Congress unit of Kargil also supports him, they are expecting that he may be able to take the seat.
And we also heard Dr. Farooq Abdullah speak about the national conference supporting Namgyal. Can you tell us what he said?
So the National Conference, at least 2 days ago, issued a statement saying that basically after their party's district president filed his nomination as an independent candidate, the NC was caught a bit unawares and they couldn't be seen looking like Congress is supporting, like India Alliance is supporting NC in Kashmir and their leaders are campaigning together. But NC's Kargil unit has backed out of campaigning for the Congress candidate in Ladakh. So then the party president issued a whip saying the Congress candidate, Sering Namgyal, he directed his cadre to support the Congress candidate there. And a day after that, on May 3rd, I believe, the Kargil unit's additional general secretary, Kamar Ali Akhun, who's a very senior leader there, he issued a press conference saying the party is forcing us to support the Congress candidate and we will not be able to do that. That's why we are resigning en masse. That in a letter to party president Farooq Abdullah, Kamar Ali Akhun had said that as the party insists upon us to act against the interests of the people of Ladakh, so we are compelled to resign en masse. This letter may be considered as a mass resignation of all party functionaries from the primary membership of JKNC. However, this is being seen as, only a resentment of the unit because it's a unit that functions together and the party would not like to lose them. However, because elections are currently on and everybody's in the middle of campaigning, the party hasn't really dealt with the issue right now.
And Naveed, tell us what the seat division is like in Jammu and Kashmir and the demands that have been raised for separate seats for Leh and Kargil.
So, as it was in the former state, there were 2 seats in the Jammu region. So, Jammu and Udhampur, 3 in Kashmir, Baramulla, Srinagar and Anantnag Rajouri, and 1 in Ladakh. Over the last few years, since the former state was split into 2 UTs, Ladakh has been demanding representation for both regions, Leh and Kargil. So currently, the larger number of MPs over the last few years have been from Leh, but which makes the Muslims in Kargil feel unrepresented. The region has its own stripes and they've managed to come together to talk to the MHA as part of a high-powered committee, but the issue of representation still remains. So while they have 1 MP and they used to have 4 MLAs, now Kargil and Leh are asking for full statehood and they are asking for 2 MPs from the region for a more fair representation.
And has this incident prompted any comments from the party or the local leaders?
Like I said, we're in the throes of the election right now. So even the party leaders, everybody's busy campaigning and Omar Abdullah's, his own seat goes to poll on May 20th, which is when Ladakh also goes to vote. And so no one's been really dealing with it at the moment. And which is why Omar will not be going to campaign in Ladakh also. Otherwise, they usually goes there to, energize the cadre, etc. So as of now, the contest is between BJP's Tashi Gyalsan, who's a fresh candidate, and Congress's Sering Namgyal and Haji Hanifa, who's an independent candidate, but former NC.
Also, Naveed, this is the first major election in the region since the abrogation of Article 370. Can you tell us what the political climate there looks like at the moment?
So in the J&K UT, this is the first parliamentary election since 2019, although we've had DDC in 2020 and Panchayat elections before that. So this time around, the language that's being spoken by almost every candidate is that of protecting identity, protecting the tashakhus, as they say in Urdu, of the Kashmiri identity that they say was snatched away by scrapping of Article 370 in August 2019. So that's the landscape. Almost every leader is speaking about how they are going to be the best candidate to protect the identity of Jammu and Kashmir and also return statehood. This is the only state that was reduced from a state to a UT, as was Ladakh that was carved out of the former state of Jammu and Kashmir. So both in Ladakh and in Jammu and Kashmir, the issue of identity is what is driving these elections largely.
Right. And what would you say is the state of the regional parties as far as the Lok Sabha polls are concerned?
So in both the regions, in Jammu and Kashmir as well as Ladakh, regional parties have had a stronger hold than national parties. So in the seat sharing agreement within the India Alliance, NC and Congress reached an agreement to contest 3 seats each. So Jammu, Udhampur and Ladakh were given to the Congress, and Baramulla, Srinagar and Anantnag Rajouri seat in the Kashmir Valley were given to the NC to contest. These two parties have largely held control over the local autonomous hill development councils in Ladakh, barring Leh. Leh is with the BJP as of now. And in the Kashmir Valley specifically, NC and PDP and the Sajad Lone-led People's Conference have had the presence on the ground. So both BJP and Congress are not contesting Kashmir Valley elections.
And in the end, we talk about Uttarakhand. Over the years, forest fires have become a fairly frequent occurrence in the state. So much so that between January and May of this year, the region has already witnessed over 1,060 forest fires, affecting more than 1,400 acres of forest land. Indian Express's Avaneesh Mishra tells us that this is a sharp increase considering that last year, the state had only witnessed 700 such cases.
So this is mostly because the rains have a lot to do with the forest fire, because if there is the moisture content in the atmosphere and the soil and the grass is higher, then there will be less cases of forest fire. So just to get a context, this year in March there was just 70 mm of rain, and in the month of April and May it was just 6.2 and 1.6 mm of rain respectively, which is very low. And if we compare this with the previous year, there was over 63 mm of rain in March and 64 mm of rain in April and 98.3 mm of rain in May. So if we compare these two numbers, then we can see that there is a big difference between the amount of rain in the previous year and this year. So because of that, because of the low moisture content, the forest fires are spreading at a much higher rate, and that is something which we need to be worried about.
Now, forest fires can occur naturally as well, like when lightning strikes or when in high temperatures, direct sunlight comes in contact with dry matter. But Avaneesh says that in Uttarakhand, most big forest fires are man-made.
Either because of negligence, or in some cases there are intentional actions, because a lot of people believe that if they are getting rid of their the pine needles, then it will kind of result into a greener grass in the next season, and a lot of people do that just to get rid of the pine needles which are in their pathway or in their fields. So it is a very common practice in Uttarakhand. And because of the dry season this year, and there is, the moisture content in the leaves and the grass is very low. So because of that, these forest fires are spreading at a much faster rate. And that is why we are facing this big issue this year.
And Avaneesh, we know that when a fire starts in a dry forest, it can be very hard to put out. So can you talk about the challenges one faces in dousing a forest fire?
I mean, when we talk about forest fire, we have this image that there must be, big machines and helicopters and all those things used to douse a forest fire. But I was talking to the officials and they said that these helicopters and water tankers are not of much use, because the forest fires are spreading in a very wide area. And if there is a limit to how much water the helicopters can carry or sprinkle over the forest fires. So because of that, in most of the cases, very basic tools like, gardening rakes or branches from trees are used to kind of create a forest line so that the fire does not spread any further. And the branches are used to kind of beat out the fire so that, it stays where it is.
And during one of the recent forest fires, you actually accompanied some of the forest officials. Tell us what you saw.
Yeah, it's very challenging because they have to use very basic tools and there is no way to kind of douse the fire, but the only way they can control it by creating fire lines so that the fire does not spread any further. And in order to do that, sometimes the forest officials and the firefighters have to kind of make fire lines which are up to like 1 or 2 kilometers long. So they do not have any other option but to inhale the thick smoke coming out of it and, working for hours in the extreme heat. So yeah, it gets very challenging because there is also a limit to how much, water or other supplies they can carry. So it becomes very challenging because not just the heat, they also have to deal with inhaling the smoke and the smoke going into their eyes. So definitely it's a very challenging task, but they also understand that this is something they have to do because if the fires are not controlled, it can be a dangerous thing.
You were listening to 3 Things by the Indian Express. Today's show was edited and mixed by Suresh Pawar and produced by Shashank, Bhargava and me, Niharika, Nanda. If you like the show, then do subscribe to us wherever you get your podcasts. You can also recommend the show to someone you think will like it. Share it with a friend or someone in your family. It's the best way for people to get to know about us. You can also tweet us at Express Audio and write to us at podcasts@indianexpress.com.